I'll call this meeting back to order, and we are on to item 11.
Item number 11 is department and committee reports, non-action items. 11A, 2025 budget hearing number 1, preliminary balanced budget and statutory presentation of the 2025 preliminary balanced budget. Nikki Simmons, Chief Financial Officer.
Good morning, Commissioners, Madam Chair. Thank you for having us here today to present the preliminary balanced budget. Before I start with my presentation, I'd like to turn it over to our County Administrator, Brett Waters.
Thank you, Nikki. Honorable Commissioners and members of the public, we are grateful for the opportunity to present the proposed 2025 El Paso County budget to you today. The proposed budget represents countless hours of work by our budget team under supervision of Nikki Simmons, so thank you to the budget team and the hard work that was represented here today. Nikki and I have coordinated extensively with both our countywide elected officials and county executive directors. I'm pleased to present a conservative budget that emphasizes public safety, roads, and stormwater infrastructure. As with last year's budget, we're proposing to add a limited number of positions. Only 3 positions are under my supervision that are proposed, with 2 additional positions proposed related to the important work of the district attorney. We also submit a responsible budget with healthy financial reserves, thanks to the foresight of the budget team and this Board of County Commissioners. We also appreciate the dedicated leadership of this Board of County Commissioners in support of our residents of El Paso County. Thank you for your consideration of the 2025 El Paso County budget.
Thank you, Mr. Waters. Commissioners, as Mr. Waters just said, this is the result of, we start this process in March of each year with all departments and offices planning for the next year's budget. So this is the result of about 7 months of work with all of your leaders across the county. This budget is administration's proposal to the Board of County Commissioners of what the budget should be for 2025. Through the next several weeks, we will be having budget hearings for you to hear some of the needs that are being presented today. You'll hear everything that is a change to the budget from me today, but the details will come when each department and office presents to their departmental critical needs that are included in this budget. And as always, in the end, the commissioners have the opportunity in November to make changes to the budget before it is formally adopted in December. So today I'll be walking through the budget process that we take and then estimates for revenues and expenditures, and then going through the actual preliminary balanced budget document. I will tell you that those documents, as of right now, are live on our website, so they are officially open for public inspection. And there are opportunities for citizens to comment directly to me, to any of your elected officials, your commissioners. You can submit comments through email or just conversations. We very much encourage public comment on any of these, as well as we have opportunity for public comment in every budget hearing that we will have. So this budget session, our priorities were to ensure, one, that we had a stable financial future for this county, as always. We want to make sure we have a recession-resistant budget. And what I mean by that is that we do not dip into reserves for ongoing expenditures, that we are not overly forecasting revenues. So one, this budget maintains a healthy reserve, and I'll be going through that a little bit later. We have conservative sales tax forecasts in this, lower than our typical or our average history. We tend to try to budget conservatively on revenue, and then if the revenues come in above budget, then we can use that funding one time for a project. And as Mr. Waters already alluded to, this has low FTE additions or full-time equivalent employee additions. We're only proposing 5 additions to the county's current FTE authorizations. Every item in this budget clearly ties to the county's strategic plan objectives of infrastructure, service quality, community trust, and health and safety. And that was a very intentional process throughout this year to ensure that everything that we are doing is leading us to make progress and improvement on the county's strategic priorities. So the county's budget, as you all are aware, has a lot of restricted funding sources in it. The county collects a lot of revenue that doesn't necessarily get to be spent at the discretion of the commissioners. There's legally restricted uses for those funds. So that we start out the budget process every year with ensuring that we properly budget for the Road and Bridge Escrow Fund, the Conservation Trust Fund, the Household Hazardous Waste Fund, the Schools Trust Fund, and local improvement districts. And I'll just take a moment to explain what each one of those are. The Road and Bridge Escrow Fund is the road and bridge fund. It's the mill levy associated with road and bridge. And under Colorado budget law, if a property is located within incorporated boundaries, such as the city of Colorado Springs, the city of Fountain, Monument, Green Mountain Falls, if a property that we are applying a mill levy specifically for the Road and Bridge Fund is in one of those incorporated areas, we have to share back 50% of our mill levy with that incorporated town or city. And so, for example, on my home, because I live in the city of Colorado Springs, 50% of my mill levy that is associated with our Road and Bridge Fund goes back to the city of Colorado Springs. So that Road and Bridge Escrow Fund is simply the pass-through dollars of our mill levy to those incorporated areas. The Conservation Trust Fund are lottery/GOCO funds, which are collected and have very specific restricted uses for them. And our Parks Department uses those to be able to fund capital projects as well as some maintenance of our county parks. Our Household Hazardous Waste Fund is our enterprise fund, in which it's self-supporting to be able to run our waste disposal program. Schools Trust Fund are fees that are collected at the time of permitting or platting at the Planning and Community Development Department on behalf of specific school districts, and those are held in trust for those school districts. We come forward to you every year and request funds to be dispersed to them as they request for capital improvements only. And then local improvement districts. The only local improvement district you have right now within the county's overall purview is the Falcon Vista LID. So then as we move on to general funds, we budget for our first priority in our budget is required to be funding the COP payments. So the certificates of participation that we have on buildings across the county, we currently have 4 buildings that have COPs outstanding for them: our Criminal Justice Center, our Judicial Complex, the Citizen Service Center, and a newly issued COP from 2024, the Sheriff's Northeast Substation. So we ensure that those are funded. And then that last one, per our agreement with the Sheriff's Office and the plans to issue that, is being fully reimbursed by the public safety taxes. And so those aren't coming out of general funds. Then the next step in the budgeting process, we budget for our self-insurance fund. And that is done through work with a lot of actuaries, with consultants, through our risk department, as well as our benefits office. We are required to budget for increased claim expenditures, as well as what's called incurred but not reported expenditure reserves, things that might happen this year, but we might not see that claim for a couple months or a couple of years past the year end, but we are required to fund all of that stuff in the year that it happens. So think about somebody having a medical claim in December of each year, but we may not pay that bill until March of the next year. We're required to fund it this year. Similarly, we have actuaries that require us to fund the risk side. If there's a possible lawsuit that might be coming and we might not even know what the disposition of that is for several years, we have to fund that in the current year. And so we use actuaries for that. On the health insurance side, our total estimated health cost increase is about 9%. Of that, we met with our Health Plan Trust Board this summer. We had 2 meetings. Health Plan Trust Board voted to increase employee premiums very slightly, about $2.05 a paycheck for employee-only coverage to about $8.54 per paycheck for employee and family coverage. And that was the first time in 4 years we have passed any increase on to the employees. That being said, it's a very minimal increase, and most of this is being picked up by the employer. And so the total for that budget for self-insurance fund is $72.7 million for next year. $12.8 million is in the risk, workers' comp, and liability side of self-insurance, and $59.9 million for health benefits. Then the next step in our budget process is ensuring that we meet the statutory match for any allocations we accept from the Department of Human Services. So Human Services is budgeted based on an allocation basis from the state. The state passes through millions of dollars to counties, hundreds of millions of dollars to counties, and those are allocated by different committees at the state. But in order for us to accept our allocations, we have to ensure that we have enough budgeted to meet the match. And there's different grants. Some are, 20% match, some are 10% match, some are a maintenance of effort. And so that estimated match for 2025 calendar year, which is half of 2 different fiscal years for the state, it comes to about $25.9 million. So in this budget, we have allocated $25.9 million to DHS. And then we look at our road and bridge fund, which can accept unrestricted funds as long as they're appropriated before the beginning of the year. And so we have additional funds proposed to go into that one time of $12 million. And I'll be going through that a little bit more later. So as I mentioned earlier, the county's budget that, you'll see $498 million in revenue, but of that, much is restricted, such as the public safety tax, the road and bridge escrow, other pass-through things, and other completely restricted grant sources. So about $298 million of the $498 million is actually general taxes, of which we have the ability to allocate to different programs. That, however, does not mean that there aren't mandates that we have to use for that $298 million. That's not fully up to anyone's discretion. There's a lot of mandates that we use that $298 million to cover. So when we start looking at the general fund, we look first at revenue sources so that we know how much money we have. And through July of 2024, sales taxes are up 3.06%. Retail being up 3.21, which is the primary portion of our budgeted revenues. Food services at 1.2%. Wholesale trade is up 4%, and accommodations actually slightly down at 2.83%. So staff is recommending a 3.5% budget plan for 2025. That's slightly higher than the 3.06 that we're seeing right now, but we've worked really closely with different economists throughout the state, local economists, state economists, and feel comfortable with a 3.5% number. Then looking at the average over the last 5 years has been 8.69. I believe the average over the last 20 years is 7.2%. And so we're still budgeting conservatively under our normal. And I realize I make this joke all the time that my crystal ball is broken. I know you guys knew that was coming, but the economy is uncertain, but I've been to several economic presentations in the last month, and all of them agree that we are not heading into any sort of recession. Things look very stable, and so we're confident that these numbers are appropriate for our budget for next year. So with that being said, our 2025 sales and use tax estimate for the general 1% tax is $173.1 million, and the related 0.23% public safety tax is $39.8 million. This is just a chart that shows the growth in our tax over the past several years, going back to 2009, and you can see numbers of 3.9 and 8.5, 4.7. So we're comfortable with the 3.5% recommendation. Then we move on to property taxes, which makes up about a third of the county's overall revenue. The property taxes we're estimating are going to be able to move up 4.04% in 2025. That is based on preliminary certifications that the assessor's office gives us in August, and then we get final certifications in December. We use those certifications for several things. One is obviously the assessed valuation, but also in there is a growth factor. The growth factor for our Tabor cap is actually a construction calculation. It's supposed to mimic population, but for local governments in Colorado, we actually do our Tabor calculation growth based on construction increases. And so we use it for that, as well as our abatement calculations. And so for 2025, we are right now preliminary planning to issue a 7.31 mil property tax. Our overall property tax cap is 8.46, but with our abatement mill that we can add to it, we're at 8.474. This represents about a 13.7% reduction in overall property taxes, and that will provide additional property tax relief to our citizens by lowering the county's actual collection of taxes. This is only for the county's portion of the property taxes. This does not affect the other taxes that the county treasurer has to collect on behalf of all the other governments that you pay property taxes on.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. I'd like to just talk briefly about the very last line there, the 13.7% reduction in EPC's mill levy. Earlier in the year, we deliberated over a 20% reduction. You may recall that well. What I'm interested in understanding is, was that 20% separate from this 13.7? So we did that previously, and then now we're doing this, or are they somehow interrelated?
They're not really related. The 20% was the 2023 taxes payable in 2024, and then this 13.7% is the 2024 taxes payable in 2025. So those are one-time credits to taxes to ensure that we stay within our Tabor cap and our Tabor calculations. And so last year we reduced it by 20%. This year the reduction is 13.7%.
Great, thank you very much. I just was interested in knowing if they were two separate activities or if they were somehow connected together, but they're two separate.
Two separate things. And then obviously everybody in the room is most likely aware that there was legislation taken during this special session here a couple months ago to change property tax rules. As a reminder, those property tax changes go into effect for the 2025 taxes payable in 2026. And so these numbers may look a little bit different next year, but for this year, we're on the same rules as we were for the 2023 taxes payable in 2024. As a reminder, I think I've already mentioned that our property tax is constrained by Tabor. It's also constrained by the 5.5% mill levy law. So we make sure that we're in compliance with both of those areas. For this year, Tabor was the more restrictive of those two, and so that's the one that's reducing our mill levy by that 13.7%. What this does is it allows for the growth in property values to be higher than the actual growth in property taxes. So if a homeowner or a property owner sees 40% growth in property values, that does not mean El Paso County's taxes will grow by 40% as we are a Tabor limited community. In addition to that credit, which is about 2024 taxes payable in 2025, from our 2023 overall fiscal spending cap, we had $8.25 million over our cap that we collected, and we kept that in reserve to then refund to our community. At this point, we have not officially determined how that will be refunded, but if we were to refund it in a similar manner to we did in 2023 taxes that we paid in 24, the refund would be about $36 per residential real property. So that will be on the 2025 property tax bills. This chart, I just put this out there to show, because we consistently talk about the taxes and the growth in taxes. El Paso County's tax makes up about 6% of the overall taxes collected. This is an actual home. My budget manager goes in and finds an average value home in the community and takes their actual bill and makes this chart. So in this specific home, the school district is receiving 46.7% of those overall taxes. The Metro District is 40%. And then you get to El Paso County at 6%, City of Colorado Springs at 3.15%. This is representative of an average home in the community. The county treasurer collects all these taxes, but very little of it goes actually to the different communities. The school districts typically, almost in every case, being the largest collector of property taxes. So the way that this works is this $500,000 home. Under current rule, there's a $55,000 exemption. So the first $55,000 of each property, each residential property, is not taxed, for a $445,000 net real valuation, and then a 6.7% assessment rate to get to an assessed valuation of $29,815. Then you apply all of the mills to that. So this home would pay $3,388 in property taxes. And if you go back, our mill is going to be 7.31. So of this 113.6 mills, 7.31 mills is El Paso County's tax. This is a chart to show the increase in property taxes over the years. And that, again, that's always constrained by Tabor or the 5.5% mill levy law. So you use those plus growth. And then the next step in the budget is to look at our fees. And our fees make up about 10% of our overall taxes. And those fees, we have consistently seen the clerk and recorder's retained collections drop as interest rates are still quite high. So those we are budgeting for next year to be down $1.9 million compared to this year's budget. Treasurer fees are budgeted to be up $1.15 million, as we've now seen the true value of the increased collections over last year. And so we're seeing about $1.15 million additional throughout the year. And then some sheriff and other intergovernmental revenues are down about $472,000. A lot of that, the sheriff's office, has to do with detaining less state inmates in the jail, and they have contracts for that. And those are a lot more now being housed at the Department of Corrections. I wanted to talk one more moment about the clerk and recorder fees. The interest rates have recently just dropped a little bit. I understand that there could be possibilities of additional drops. If those do continue to drop, I would expect that the clerk and recorder's revenue will increase. At the same time, that means our interest revenue will decrease. So I think there's kind of an offsetting effect. So throughout 2025, if we start seeing increased clerk and recorder fees, I would think that we would see decreased interest from our budget. So we'll watch those two things pretty closely. We then move on to our 2024 or our 2025 expenditure budgets. And we start with the idea that you retain your base budget. We do that for a lot of reasons, but one is we don't want to encourage people to spend their budget if they didn't need it in a certain year. So we don't want to cut budgets because they had underspending, because we encourage underspending from every one of our departments. So we retain expenditure-based budgets. And then what we do is we talk about what we call critical need or additional funding requests. And that is for departments and offices. And this is the process that we start in March of every year. And we ask department's office to come forward and tell us, what are the most critical things that you're facing? Where do you see that you need more money? What projects aren't you able to get done? If you need more people, let us know what positions they would be and what outcomes would happen from them. And we compile all of that. And then we start what we call the strategy phase of the budget, where we meet with countywide elected officials, we meet with department executive directors, we meet with them one-on-one with me, two-on-one, me and Brett go and meet with everybody, and then we also have what we call strategy meetings throughout the year. And those meetings happened this summer, where we have all of the elected officials meet with us. And I want to give a shout out to all the elected officials and all the department directors. They make those meetings a priority in their day, in their calendaring. And it's really hard to get that many people in the same room, and they always make it work. Because they understand that the finances of this county are so critical to ensuring that we can meet our goals and our objectives. And so they make those a priority. So we meet together and talk about the issues that everybody's seeing. And then each department director, as well as elected official, can kind of understand like why we would be looking at adding X versus Y, and they have an opinion and they can share that within each group. And so those meetings are very helpful. So the first thing in this budget, we are recommending a 4% total compensation package. For right now, CPI is projected to be approximately 2.6% for 2024. Human Resources is recommending a model where we'll have a partial cost of living adjustment that would be applied to all employees, as well as a pay-for-performance model. And so the overall compensation package is on average 4%. Another significant priority in the county's budgeting process, as always, is our infrastructure and specifically our road projects. And so we are proposing to allocate $12 million one time to the Department of Public Works to strategically address the highest priority road projects. And for this year, Mr. Ladley will be speaking to you later on this month about that specific request. But it would be a combination of road construction resurfacing as well as safety improvement projects. And just a little tidbit, we have been working very hard at the county to increase our road budget. For 2014, which was the year before we started strategically trying to increase that, the road and bridge budget was just shy of $14 million. For 2025, our preliminary balance budget for road and bridge is $41.3 million. So a significant increase. This chart just shows you year after year how we built to that $41 million. You can see the years we put in additions. This really tall pie or slice right here, 2022, is when we had one-time funds available from ARPA to be able to use revenue replacement dollars authorized under the American Rescue Plan Act, and we allocated 100% of that to our roads because it was flexible money that could go into roads. And this is just another chart showing the same idea, but with a little more detail on the bottom to show you where those funds came from to be able to make those dollars work. Then compiling the budget, we look at ensuring we're reserving enough. I just talked about Tabor from 2023 that we're going to refund on the 2025 property tax bills. We also are closely watching our 2024 Tabor. Our current estimate right now is that we'll be over our Tabor spending cap by $4.5 million. And so we have that in reserve to be able to refund for the 2025 taxes payable in 2026. That number is very preliminary. One, we still have about 5 months worth of financial activity to work on because we have the 4 months we have left of the year. Or 3 months left of the year, we have a couple months we're closing, and then we have a month in January where we actually close out everything and book everything. And so we won't have a final number until about March of 2025 for our 2024 fiscal spending cap. And then the growth calculation we're using is off the August preliminary assessments. Those will be final in December with the certification evaluation. And then sales and intergovernmental impacts have been decreasing throughout the year, and so we're just closely monitoring that. So some other assumptions in the 2025 budget. We are not planning to be over. The budget itself does not make us over our 2025 fiscal spending cap. If there are changes to the budget, state grants, other things, differences in sales taxes, things like that. But right now we are planning to be under a Tabor cap in 2025. Additionally, reserves are very important to me and to our administration. We have a $9.23 million emergency reserve funded at this point. We did start the year with a full $10 million reserve, but we used $770,000 to do additional match to the NRCS grant. This will be replenished through year-end underspending and or in unanticipated revenues, which are revenues above budget. I do anticipate that we will replenish this emergency reserve up to the $10 million by when we close out the year. In addition to that, we do have other reserves. Our minimum fund balance policy is a calculation of 10% of our general fund sales tax, 0.5% of property tax, and 5% of all other revenues. That leaves us with about $19.7 million in unrestricted reserves. We also are required to maintain a 3% Tabor reserve, which is about $10.8 million. That being said, all of that, the county is sitting at 24.3% reserves, which is a very healthy fund balance, but a good place to be in with revenue uncertainties. And a place that we feel comfortable moving into 2025, not worried about decreases in revenues. There are slight changes to things in the budget. So As I mentioned earlier, the strategic plan led this.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think I wanted to highlight, I think, was it earlier this year or the end of last year, that all these improvements in the general fund, reserves and emergency reserves got us to the highest level of bond ratings or something like that, that saves us, that saves the county taxpayers money, correct?
It does. You're absolutely correct, Commissioner. When we went through our bond rating process to be able to issue the COP for the Sheriff's Northeast Substation, thank you. I left my water. The bond raters, one of the criteria that they gave us specifically when they increased our bond rating to the highest allowable for government was that our reserves were much, much more healthy than they were the last times they've rated us over the last decade. And they were very comfortable with our financial position and felt like we were well suited to be able to respond to any downfalls in revenue or emergencies that could affect our government. So very positive things that came from that and a lot to do with our fund balance.
I just have one comment too. I just wanted to compliment our commissioners, Gonzalez and Vanderwerf, who, when they first came on, really pushed to increase the reserve. We're actually looking at the county's reserve policy as we try to make a formal policy, or as I try to push. I know there's several others trying to push for a formal reserve policy over at Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments, because this is such a healthy situation to be in. And this is something that our finance department, all of us can be very proud of.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Great comments and from my commissioners, and I appreciate all that we've done, the team and the commissioners over the 8 years that I've been a county commissioner on this. I do have just one quick question. It's the highest bond rating that a public agency can get, as has been mentioned. What is the percentage of public agencies that have that level of bond rating? I don't know if you know that or not. I mean, are we in the 25% range or 5% range or 1/10 of 1% range? Like, how does it distinguish with others?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I can reach out to our underwriters and see if they have any information on that. I do know, like, anecdotally, that I was told this is an incredibly hard bond rating to get for a government, and that we were one of their few clients who were raised to that AAA rating.
And that's the rating AAA?
So if we had general obligation debt, it would be rated AAA. So if you actually look at the Sheriff's Office COP, it was rated AA+, which that's only because any issuance that has non-appropriation language in it, which in order to be compliant with Tabor, COPs have non-appropriation language in it, it has to be lowered by 1 notch. So if you look at that actual rating, AA+, but if we were to have general obligation, we'd be a AAA rated community.
Thank you. I am interested in that percentage when you can get to it.
Absolutely, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Bremer.
Thank you. In addition to that, you did somewhat highlight it back on slide 19, but a $27.3 million change in, $27.3 thousand change in roads and bridge over the time that we increased our reserves and got that bond rating up while spending more money on the things that are most important to our residents, and during which, again, Commissioner to my left and Commissioner over here have been serving the majority of that time that those improvements have been made. I think the two together are just significant and impressive. And again, the delta in what we put in since 2014 is $27.3 thousand in road and bridge. So,
yeah, and that has been, I appreciate the comments, Commissioner. That's been a very strategic and intentional effort by county administration as well as our elected leadership to ensure that the infrastructure for our county residents is a priority for us.
And I'll just add to that as we are both increasing those reserves and funding properly and prioritizing those very important core services, we are still keeping our taxes low for residents. And so that is a huge testament to the incredible work that is done by this team as well, to make sure that we can actually prioritize and really work within that budget that our citizens set for us. And I think that, makes what we are seeing here even more important, exciting, and responsible for our citizens.
Thank you. So, as I mentioned earlier, every single thing that we're asking to change in this budget clearly ties to our identified strategic plan objectives of infrastructure, service quality, community trust, and health and safety. And we've already talked a lot about our infrastructure with our roads, but we also have significant areas of stormwater to address. And so that is identified in the budget as well. Service quality clearly tied to our employees and retaining and attracting top talent to be able to serve our citizens. Community trust and financial transparency, and doing the right thing for our community, as well as obviously health and safety, ensuring the safety of our residents. So the needs addressed in the 2025 preliminary balanced budget, these are the additions that we are requesting being added to base budgets. So I'm going to go quickly through each line. This slide are the items that we, as administration, felt were like kind of almost mandates, for lack of a better term, things we had to do. And the next two slides are the departmental requests that you will see during the critical need hearings that were included in the preliminary balanced budget. So the first line on this is a statutory pay increase for our elected officials. As you're aware, elected officials primarily, with just a couple exceptions, are set by statute with their pay. When we have new commissioners coming on board in 2024 or re-elected commissioners, there's a statutory pay increase, as well as we have our district attorney who is the term is ending this year, so we will either have a re-elected or a new district attorney for 2025, and so we have asked for funding for that. The countywide ERP system and HRIS, HCM system, this is the fourth year of a 4-year plan to be able to fully fund that project, and so this is the last time I anticipate that we will see this as a critical need request. It's $1.5 million one time, and that is for a replacement for our enterprise resource planning software. Currently, we use JD Edwards. We are going through a project right now to be able to go out for bid for a new system that would improve our ability to transact throughout the county. I mentioned earlier the 4% budget allocation for pay increases, and so that comes out to $8.4 million of general funds, and then we combine that with other funds from restricted grants. Communications is requesting $125,000 for website EDA compliance, and specifically this is for software licenses. And I want to be clear, this is not the entire cost of that mandate. That mandate, we are putting hundreds of thousands of dollars into from some restricted funding that we have in 2024's budget. This is the ongoing cost just for the software licenses that we need in order to make the documents that go onto the county website compliant with that legislation to be able to be ADA accessible. And so this is ongoing in perpetuity, and only a small portion of the actual costs that we're putting into that project.
Commissioner Van der Werf.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate your mentioning that this is not the entire cost of compliance for this bill that comes from the state, which is an unfunded mandate. And I appreciate, the intent of the bill, but they should have put a fiscal note on it and funded it if they wanted this. I just feel like there's other approaches to this. So a couple of quick questions. Well, this is the recommended budget increase for compliance with this law from the legislature at $125,000 for 2025. what would be what's the expected total cost, in a general number across several years in order to get to compliance? Because you'd mentioned this is not the total cost. So is it in the 200,000 or 500,000 or where a general number?
What I can tell you, Commissioner, is for 2024, as of today, we've allocated about $400,000 to the project. And then if we're asking for another $125,000 a year ongoing, in 2 more years, that would be 250. So we're looking at within a couple of years, we're at $650,000.
So the total would be about 650,000, give or take. We could just maybe say it'll be over $600,000 for sure.
It absolutely will be over 600,000 for sure.
And then I'm well aware of the fact that the other problem with this bill is even in having that expense, we're going to have to take a fair amount of stuff off of our website because that would be much more expensive to get all of this to be compliant. So the problem with that for me is this bill is going to cause us to reduce our openness and transparency in order to afford what it's mandating for us. And then knowing that, I don't know how much is going to be pulled off. I just know it's going to be fairly substantial. And then I remain concerned about the other counties, the smaller counties, this unfunded mandate from the legislature, some counties which have only 4,000 citizens in them, and I have no idea how they're going to have any hope of complying with this. So I know this has been a discussion about possibly even closing down websites for some counties because they just can't afford compliance. So thank you for letting me know. About over $600,000 for El Paso County, plus a reduction in the amount of material we'll have on the website in order to comply.
I just want to add to that. I appreciate Commissioner Vanderwerf talking about the impact of these unfunded mandates and not only its impact on El Paso County and kind of moving us backwards, quite frankly, in the transparency space around this and how it's going to affect so many other local governments. And want to point out that these things were all shared with the legislature when this happened. That there would be an additional cost and that it would impact potentially transparency for our residents. It's some of the important work that happens with our government affairs team to be able to make sure that lawmakers understand the implications of these. And it's unfortunate that rather than hear from the boots on the ground, those folks who have to implement these and really live within these, that there was an unwillingness to work together in a completely bipartisan manner with counties across the state in order to make sure that counties could continue to provide, again, good services. We appreciate the intent. We want to do everything we can to make things accessible, and yet there are limitations to some of the things prescribed in the bill.
I have a comment too.
Commissioner Williams.
My current frustration of this bill that we are talking about is the disagreement and the interpretation by the state that this bill went into effect when it was signed. And so when I went out to do research on CDOT's website, everything except for 3 months had been removed. Everything. So they've removed 7 years of records and you have to request them. And everything else had been removed. And so it was just, it was very frustrating because there was already, when the legislation passed, there was already a disagreement with how the state was going to interpret it versus how the author of the bill interpreted it. And the state said, no, we have to, because the expense of being out of compliance is so incredibly high. And the state said, we have to be conservative in our interpretation, and immediately took all their stuff down. And that's been very frustrating. So,
Commissioner Gonzalez.
I might as well add on. So we all brought this up over the last course of the year, 2 years when this was coming up. So my example is everybody knows I like to do my own research. So I went up to, as I've done for the last several years, the local urban renewal authority to get some information on research, and they only have the current month of information for meetings. After I was able to access years worth of data. Now, 1 month of data is available. That's not transparency. So this is the, idiocy of government sometimes.
Thank you, commissioners. The next item on the list is our Digital Strategy and Technology Department commonly known as IT, has a $52,000 software license cost increase from VMware. It's a mission critical software and the license cost is increasing and we need to fund that. Our Justice Services Department pretrial release division is requesting $62,500 for pretrial services testing fees. These are drug screens that are typically court ordered. They're costing more and there's just more volume of them as we're have more people on pretrial release through that program. And so that increases $62,500. I've already mentioned this item several times. This is $12 million for roads resurfacing, construction, and safety improvements for our Department of Public Works. And then a $4.5 million ask. This is actually a $5.5 million ask, but $1 million of it is funded from 2024's budget. For additional courtroom construction. This is the result of several years of working with our courthouse staff and the chief judge and the state in order to increase capacity for the courthouse in the most cost-effective manner. So this is funding that facilities is requesting to be able to add 4 essentially magistrate courtrooms in the courthouse in the existing space.
I just want to point out this is what I made a reference to in my comments this morning about the CCI priority that this bill put forward. We are dealing with some of our courthouse space constraints through this budget, but we are also looking for longer term solutions before we get to a point where it becomes more critical in trying to work through CCI to encourage the state to help counties, not just us, but counties have a grant program that can be accessible for those who are experiencing these higher volumes as we are, where the employees of the courthouse are state employees and we are at the whim of the state in terms of how those things all work. We don't have the ability to make those decisions, and so I know that you're very aware of that. But for the general public, understanding that not only are we addressing this in a manner of looking at our current needs, but we're also looking towards the future and how we can make this work for El Paso County and other counties across the state.
Thank you. So then the departmental needs that are addressed in the critical need process that are actually in the preliminary balanced budget, these are the ones that you will hear individual presentations from each elected office or department director as we have critical need hearings later this month. The assessor's office is requesting $150,000 for an upgrade to their geographic information system. This is a request, kind of a joint request from IT and the assessor's office, but sponsored primarily by the assessor's office. The clerk and recorder is requesting a net increase of $182,000 for postage. As we're probably all aware, the clerk and recorder's office does the most mailings through our postal service, ballots, DMV renewals, even DMV transactions going through the mail. They do a lot of mailing. So increases in postage significantly affect their office. The clerk and recorder's office is also requesting $125,000 to be able to put ballot images online that would be ADA accessible. So commissioners, this is another area to look at with the ADA law that's costing money to be able to keep a current service that we have that is optional. Like there's no mandate that we have ballot images online, but it's something the clerk and recorder's office would like to do. And so he will be presenting to the data behind this request later this month. Communications is requesting a full-time open records and communications specialist. This position exists currently at a part-time status. So the funding difference is just to make that person full-time. And I want to be really clear with the amounts on here that these are fully loaded salary changes or requests. And so when you see, for example, the next line, this asset management specialist at $132,000, that is not the salary of the person. That is a fully loaded cost. It includes one-time costs to be able to onboard the person, computers, if they say somebody who needs a truck or a vehicle, I don't think any of these are those. It includes IT costs. Every time we have a new person come on board, we have additional IT costs, such as computers, Microsoft 365 licensing costs. There's other softwares that we pay per license, as well as obviously salary, payroll taxes, and benefits. So these costs are fully loaded. So anyways, communications, they have a significant increase year over year in Cora requests. And so we want to ensure that we are properly responding to any open record request in a timely manner. And so they're requesting that change from that part-time to full-time status. Our community services department in our parks office is requesting an asset management specialist to specifically track and help understand the assets that we have in parks. This is clearly tied to objective 1 in our strategic plan of assessing our infrastructure and being able to properly fund it in the future. As well as the next item, which is contracted project design and construction support at $150,000 ongoing. As our county administrator alluded to earlier, we have 2 positions being requested at the district attorney's office. One is the chief deputy district attorney, and then one is a county court legal assistant, as well as they are asking for a $100,000 operating increase. There's a lot of things that go into that, such as software increases, postage, things like that, and they were able to fully justify that operating increase. I mentioned earlier with infrastructure that we are looking at our stormwater program and asking for 4 items in the stormwater program. One is for $500,000 for the South Academy Pond maintenance, which are some improvements that need to be made to keep these ponds in compliance with our current stormwater requirements. Condition assessment of all the stormwater conveyance systems, a stormwater master plan and capital improvement project plan, as well as a condition assessment of the Windmill Gulch regional ponds. And so those are the items that our our Public Works interim director will be presenting to later this month. Facilities is requesting $107,000 for contracted parking garage security. That is to maintain a program that we implemented this year with one-time spending, and we're asking for that to be added to the budget ongoing. Emergency management is asking for a total of $175,000, $25,000 ongoing to be able to upgrade their personal protective equipment on a 5-year cycle, and then $150,000 one time for the truck boxes for vehicles, which we already have in the budget. So this is the upfits to make them hazmat vehicles. And then planning is requesting 1 FTE, which is a fire safety and wildfire mitigation planning manager to work with the local fire districts as we do land planning. And lastly, the sheriff's office is requesting $600,000 as a salary adjustment for EPSO staff. And that would be in addition to the overall 4% pay increase that we are including. So they are included in that. The sheriff's office has been able to articulate a need for an additional adjustment to the sheriff's office, which will also be supplemented with public safety taxes. So the total request for this is actually $1.25 million, but $650,000 comes from the public safety tax. So $600,000 from the general fund is the request. So to summarize the full-time employees, we are proposing just those 5 employees, really kind of 4.5 because 1/2 is already here, but 5 FTE changes. So we currently have 3,088 authorized positions. This would change our allocation to 3,093. It's a 0.2% increase in authorized positions, and here are the departments that those are in. Some key budget dates. Today, October 8th, is the day you get to listen to me talk for a while. Presentation of the preliminary balanced budget. And as I mentioned earlier, this is the opening of our official budget sessions, opening a public comment period. We have the budget open for public inspection on our website, as well as printed copies upstairs. We then will have 2 critical need hearings. Almost everybody will be heard on October 22nd. It's going to be a full day of critical need hearings. And at each of those presentations, if citizens wish to comment directly on that item, we welcome that. Then, excuse me, On October 15th, we will hear from our district attorney's office. And so that one didn't fit with the October 22nd schedule. So we'll have one critical need hearing, which is the district attorney's office on the 15th, and then everybody else that you'll be hearing from is on the 22nd. November 5th is the date that we will do final direction. That's the date that I get to do math in public and stand in front of the commissioners with the spreadsheet. And if the commissioners wish to make changes to the budget, we kind of look for head nods. There's no official action that day, but that's when the commissioners can say like, hey, let's remove this from the budget and add this or decrease this or increase that. And so we have that, and that's the date we get the final direction. And then the staff takes the next couple of weeks to prepare all the documents you need to officially approve the budget on December 10th. December 15th is our statutory deadline. In order to do that, we have a statutory deadline to be able to adopt our budget and certify the mill levy. So that day, we will be in front of you to adopt the budget, certify the mill levy, as well as an administrative resolution to allow the treasurer to transfer the funds as appropriate. So, with all of that being said, we are going to move to the actual budget document itself, which you all have a printed copy of and is also available online. I'm going to quickly go through this just to show you some of the pages and how to use this document. Some of the things you've already seen, but in the front, there's several pie charts that help you break down the budget. This is how we break down our revenues. We can see overall, sales and use tax and other restricted revenues, things like that. Then we get to the expenditures. We have a $530.8 million expected budget for expenditures, and you can see about 64% of that is in personnel, and then only about 2.5% in capital. We break down the unrestricted general fund, which is really the funds we typically think of as the funds that we have more control over. That's the money that, but there's still mandates in here that we have to keep. Public safety makes up about 44% of that. County administration and support services, 22.5% of that. And then down from there. But I do want to break out the public safety and county administration because public safety encompasses a lot of things. So does county administration. That is, there's a lot of things in county administration that you don't think of as typical administration. They're things that report into the county administrator. So for county administration support services, you can see it's the Board of County Commissioners, Board of Equalization, Human Resources, Financial Services, Government Affairs, Communications, Facilities, Utilities, and your Digital Strategy and Technology Department. Public safety, your sheriff's office, of that over, that $102 million that is allocated to public safety, 66% is your sheriff's office, 22% district attorney, and then you have coroner, security, justice services, and emergency management. And then we look at total public safety because the unrestricted general fund doesn't encompass everything that we're putting into public safety. And so we look at all of the public safety, including the benefits that are sitting in the self-insurance fund, for the fact that $180.3 million of our funding is going to public safety. That's the total public safety expenditure when you compare to that $530 million budget. The same chart you've already seen for breaking out the mill levy, and then the same critical need requests. This is our current count of full-time equivalent positions. I mentioned 3,088 is our current authorization, 3,093 is the request with those 5 additions here. And you can see them by department. Changes to revenue, so you can see, like for example, sales and use tax, the increase is $4.5 million in the general fund. This is changes to the revenue budget, and so you can just see like the main areas, like you can see this decrease in clerk and recorder fees and charges. You can see other areas where you're wondering where the revenues are changing. And then we do the same thing for the expenditure, the base budget. You'll see the removal of one-time critical needs from last year because we take last year's budget. This is the original adopted budget. We take out what was in there for one time, then we put in what's being asked for one time for this year. And then these ongoing critical needs are a combination of a lot of things. They are moves that happen throughout the year if one department transferred funding from one department to another ongoing. If this includes the allocation of the 4% pay increases. So you're going to see additions to most departments. Well, that's because of the increases to payroll throughout there. And so you can get their preliminary balanced budgets by department. So you can, I don't know, grab justice services and see that their budget's moving from 1.2 million to 1.218 million overall. My slide froze. Let's try this again. Service is temporarily unavailable. Please try again later. All right, well, let's just go through the rest of because you all have the document in front of you and it is available online already for our citizens if they're following along. And I just have a couple of pages left. So I am on page, well, I was on 18, 19 to begin with. So I'm going to go to 21. So this is the budget at a glance. It shows you by fund how you can go through and see like the total general fund by types of revenue, by fund, and then you can see restricted versus unrestricted, personnel versus operating in each fund to get to the total $530 million budget. Okay, I'll just finish this with this one and then we'll do that for the next because I only have 2 pages left. Thank you, Blake. Page 22 is very important. It's our fund balances. So you can see across the reserves and we are allocating, you can see how much we start with in reserves, revenues in, expenditures out for each fund. You can see all of our required reserves here, the Tabor Reserve, the BOCC Emergency Reserve, our estimated Tabor numbers. And then the next page on page 23 is allocation of revenues by area. So that's where you'll get information. So it's kind of hard if you're only looking at one fund to see like what is our sales tax because sales tax is throughout all of the funds. But this is a great page on page 23 to be able to look and say, okay, we have $173.1 million of sales taxes, of which only $93 million is allocated to the general fund. So you can see where our sales tax gets allocated, our property taxes get allocated, fees are at by every department. And then the very last 2 pages are each department's budget by personnel, operating, capital, and then reimbursements that come in for our overall net budget of $530 million. So all of that information is out there for everyone to look at. If you have questions, I'd be more than happy to answer those from anybody, from commissioners, from departments and offices, or citizens. Would love to have discussions about the proposed budget.
Commissioner Williams.
Yes, I just have one question. You may not know off the top of your head, but the medical contract for the gel, how much is that going to increase this year?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay.
What I do know is that the funding that we put into the sheriff's budget during the 2024 budgeting cycle is sufficient to hold it because we did understand that there was a increase in the contract and we funded that last year for him to be able to include that. So there is no request for additional funding for that.
Okay, and that comes from the general fund,
He does
not
pay
the
that from
public
his general
safety.
fund, and we have funded that in full for his general fund. And like I said, last year we funded it a little bit higher amount than the 2024 amount so that he could afford that ongoing.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Nikki. I think this is the end of the regular ones, the
Yes.
PIDs. So I do want to thank you again. The last 2 years have been great work. I mean, great work all the years, but the first several years we were, it was a little bit of struggle, right? We showed those numbers. How do we get to more money for roads? How do we get more money for public safety? How do we get more money to, an emergency reserve so that we can and we've had to do it, I think, 2 out of the last 3 years, pull some money from reserves to pay for flooding and other disasters, natural disasters in the community. that's been hard. But these I've been so pleased with these last couple of budgets where we've been able to get the additional money to funds, and that's a compliment to you and your staff and your team. They do outstanding work, as well as Brad. I'll give Brad a compliment as well. But the continued work, excellence the last several years on this. I did want to say this doesn't have my one favorite slide, because I do like it, and if you could bring it up sometime in a future meeting, because I think the public needs to know those great strides being shown here today are done on a tight budget, as somebody mentioned. I think our chair mentioned there's a 10 counties slide. There's a 10 largest counties in Colorado, and we're the largest county. We don't have the largest budget because the metro area has larger budgets, but we're the largest county in Colorado. And if you look, and I believe the data is probably still the same, but if we can get the accurate one, the last several years, we have, on a per capita revenue stream, our tax dollars, we're number 10. We're the lowest on this slide that shows where we stand amongst other. We did move up. Okay, so it looks like we're not at bottom anymore, but still we're in the bottom 2 or 3 of revenue. For all the great work that we do for our community, understand that we are on one of the tightest budgets in tax revenue, which is a compliment, because people here in El Paso County would like lower taxes. But it makes things difficult, it makes things tough, and it makes your work harder in terms of coming up with a strong, balanced budget that meets the needs of our community, and you get it done every year. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner, we'll be happy to share that information. It's a little bit harder now. 10 County used to have a budget conference where they would freely share that information. They no longer create that 10 County budget book that we were used to for years. We used it for a lot of information. Anecdotally, I think it's because we made some other people look bad because we did a lot more with a lot less, but don't say that in public. Oh, wait. But I do know us and one other county by far have lower per capita tax burdens than the other 8 counties.
I think the other county is Arapahoe, but I think the right word is we smoked them for 20 years, and so they went to a 9-county budget and left us out.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate the comments of my fellow commissioners, and also express my appreciation to the budget team and really the whole staff for the great work that we've been doing. But I think there's other things to mention as well, because it's not only been doubling the investment in our roads, it's also been doubling the productivity of our road crews, which I am sorry to say, it seems like the state has put a lot more money into roads and has not gotten double the productivity. So there's some real challenges there. But in addition to just that, we've also, and we know we've increased our emergency reserves to a number that's even exceeding what NACO recommends. We've also added regional parks during this time period. So we've been investing in parks. And we've also increased our investment in the retirement fund for our employees, which has substantially added to the stability of our retirement fund. Not only that, we have arguably the best benefits package for a public agency in the state of Colorado, with some really good benefits in that package. And while doing all of that, we've reduced our mill levy. And while doing all of that, we've increased our services, for example, Citizen Connect. And that's a testament to a lot of work we've done to automate our services to make it easier to get citizen input for us to do our job. And then even adding to that, we've improved our emergency management, negotiating a regional office of emergency management between the city and the county. And I do truly feel that because we did that, there have been some natural disasters that could have been huge things akin to Waldo Canyon that never, in fact, actually happened because we had better response. And all of that without raising taxes. So, the few specific ones are maybe the bigger ones, like emergency reserves and doubling road repair. But there's a bunch of other smaller things that when you look at it all collectively, it's, in my humble opinion, pretty remarkable what we've been able to accomplish. But I think it's a testament to just good, hard work. Good, hard nug work that doesn't really get out into public domain very often. But I know, and I feel very confident being in my last few months as a county commissioner, that we've done really good work financially in the county and have done great things, to improve on and enhance the services to our citizens. So thanks. And thanks to you guys for helping us get there.
Commissioner Williams.
Yes, I wanted to say how many employees do we have right now? Or how many approved employees do we have?
Our authorized FTE count right now is 3,088.
Okay. I think the amazing thing, though, is at the end of the day, all of this cannot work without each and every employee who does this work. So I wanted to give credit to the employees, too. We encourage innovation. We encourage transparency. We encourage them to be responsible and accountable for their jobs so that if they are able to work from home. And so I think we've done some really good things for our employees to encourage them to help us be a very successful county. And we cannot do our job every day. Our supervisors, our department heads cannot do the job every day without the work of every line employee who's out there working very hard for us. And I wanted to just say I appreciate every one of them. Thank you.
Vice Chair Bremer.
Commissioner Williams just said that beautifully, and I'll extend that, Nikki, to your entire team. Just a smattering of which we see here in the auditorium here today, and behind you and behind all of them are so many other employees who help this budget come together really from the front lines up. It's about what do our employees need to do their jobs and to have a citizen-focused customer service mindset. And that filters up all the way into the line items that we see in this budget. So I, too, am very proud of how this has been done. I'm going to say it again. I'm very, very proud of the stability to which Commissioner Williams and I came into, and then later Commissioner Geithner, because of the hard decisions that were made before us, and that's with Commissioner Gonzalez and Commissioner Vanderwerf. So we're in a really great place. I see in an unsure economic environment, I see a very sure thing in how El Paso County will continue to serve its citizens. So thank you to you, your staff, every employee, and to those who have done the hard work of diligently looking at what we should and can be doing for our citizens and the things we shouldn't. So thank you very much.
And I'll just kind of wrap up some of those great words by all of my colleagues. And incredibly grateful for the work that we are continuing to build upon as we have members who have been here much longer. And me being the newest member, I get to see that work and be able to continue to build upon the work that has already taken place. And we've done a lot of talking, kudos and accolades, about the how this all gets done. But at the end of the day, the important part is the why. And that is why we do this, because we fundamentally, I know, all believe as a board that government is here to serve the residents of our community. We're also here to make sure that we're working within the budget that community gives us. And to the point of Commissioner Gonzalez in particular, that can sometimes be a challenge, but that's what we signed up for, is that the challenge of doing that. We know our families sitting around their kitchen tables all have challenges, and they have to sit through and look at what their priorities are. And I think we very much understand and respect that here, and want to make sure that we are providing those core government services, that we are being respectful of the hard work that is behind every single one of those tax dollars, and we are making sure that we are providing services that respect our citizens and their needs and desires in our community. So I also say kudos and thank you, but just wanted to remind ourselves all of the why of why we are here, and our citizens who may be watching, of lots of accolades today about the how things are getting done, but behind all of that is our why and serving our citizens.
Thank you, Commissioner. I just have two things to add. One is to express my appreciation to all of you for your support through this budget process. Hopefully the public is aware this is not the first time any commissioner is seeing this information. It was a very collaborative process all year long. But in the end, it really is administration's proposal to you of what this budget should look like for next year. And then a couple to say thank you. You've mentioned the budget team. We have our budget manager and our division manager here, as well as a budget analyst, Lori, Shanna, April, as well as the entire budget team. We have 8 people upstairs working on the budget at all times, and they do a fantastic job. And then I don't embarrass him, but I want to thank our county administrator. He is very, very involved in this process on almost a daily basis, ensuring that what we're spending our money on is really pushing us forward in our strategic priorities, and does a lot of work to push us forward with the budgeting process. So I want to express appreciation to all of you, and also just note to the public that we are not asking for a vote on this today. This is simply a presentation of the budget, and the vote, no action will happen until that December 10th meeting. So that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for your support, commissioners.
Thank you.